Hello, welcome to another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed. And today we will be talking about the solutions for Common Core's industrial education. Now, to give a context of why we are talking about education in the Living Income Guaranteed, is to remind ourselves that all of the systems, all of the institutions in our current world are profoundly infiltrated or mostly influenced by the current motive that drives entire society. And can you turn off your
video open, Bill?
Yeah. Okay. So I was saying that in the Equal Life Foundation, we are entirely presenting why solutions are required, because everything in this world system has been tainted by the motive of profit. And so education, as any other area in our lives, is now already being infiltrated by that as well and founded upon that. And so our aim here in this Hangout is to discuss one of the latest developments of the problems that we've seen, which is the Common Core standards in America. And for that, we have two specialists on the topic. From America, we have Bill Connor. Hi, Bill.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. And Anna Brix from Scandinavia, Sweden.
Hi, everyone.
So, guys, let's begin with placing an overview, because I'm sure that many people might not be aware of, what is Common Core. Before I continue, I would like to remind everyone that questions are open for the public, for all of you, throughout the Hangout in the link or the option that says Q&A, as well as reminding you that we've also discussed previously with Anna specifically the education for a world in order, which means laying out also a bit of the introduction of what we will be speaking of today here, more specifically in relation to Common Core. So, Bill, let's begin with you and tell us what the Common Core is as a general overview.
Well, the Common Core started out as it was implemented basically into as it was basically it started out as people that began the Common Core is governors, it was senators, it was kind of officers in charge of finance, and basically it was pushed into the school system with tax incentive for states. So it was kind of like states just kind of adopted it without having a chance to provide any feedback on the standards, and also there were not any teachers on the board as it was drafted. So the Common Core, in a nutshell, basically exists as it focuses on syntax, format of writing, reciting information. It gets away from personal experience, and as students go from kindergarten up through 12th grade, it moves away from any sort of contributing from personal experience, and it becomes more about how they are reacting to information. That
so
seems to be.
What is the aim of Common Core? Because in essence, we know that our education has already been directed to become a competitive type of society, especially within the context of living in a capitalist system. But what's so relevant about the implementation of this Common Core? You mentioned how people had no choice or no ability to vote on it. So what are the consequences that have stemmed from this implementation in America?
A lot of what the Common Core does is it, again, like I said, it becomes in reaction to information. So it places the teacher as gatekeeper of information and knowledge, and the student is more kind of just acclimated, kind of a sponge for it. So by the time the student is done with college, it becomes the student is just the student isn't aware of the cultural ideologies that exist outside of academia, so they don't know how to move through glass ceilings. They only know how to kind of just do blue-collar jobs, and it kind of maintains a lot of status quo.
Which is ironic because the purpose, the self-proclaimed purpose of the Common Core is to make students college ready and to, you know, make America's children successful.
Yeah, and that's another thing that they keep saying, college readiness, but the teachers that implemented the Common Core between high school and like they never talked to each other. There was never a discussion. The people in charge of the content never really overlapped in that regard. So yeah, there's a huge jump, I've noticed, especially between high school, where you're doing the 5-paragraph essay and just reciting information. Then once you get to college, you are supposed to, like, all of a sudden involve yourself in discussion. And a lot of students just don't know how to, don't believe that they can contribute anything, because we have this.
As a context, I have to say to everyone that's watching that Bill specializes in the writing aspect of Common Core as well, and the solutions that he will also be sharing. So let's look also at the purpose of it. As we were mentioning, it's essentially to create the line of workers for production that is essentially, well, that's why we call it the industrialized education. But Anna, can you tell us about you know, one of the main consequences that are happening in this consideration of the implementation thereof with teachers specifically? What is the role of teachers in this case?
Well, this is not a question that I would say that I'm so qualified to answer, as I'm not teaching in the American school system. But in relation to what Bill was saying, as a general point, with the teacher being the gatekeeper, one of the things that is happening, which is also what Common Core is being criticized for, is that there is a claim that it is created with teachers and that teachers are involved. But if you go and dig a little bit deeper and you investigate how the initiative was created, actually the two only people who were part of developing the initiative who was teachers in, they were college professors, and I think one of them is also a high school teacher. They actually stepped out of the initiative once it was done, and they refused to sign and say that this is the best way to test children learned. So from what I have investigated, I would say that the teacher may be a gatekeeper, but it's like that is all that they are. You know, they're the prison guard in a way, that becomes their function. And they, as a teacher, are a tool of transferring information is ourselves. You know, it's very important as a teacher to be able to be creative, to be able to rely on your own resources, but this is actually putting teachers completely out of the equation and is supposed to only be the gatekeeper of the information and not really provide anything, which is then also the point, because we want, or the Common Core initiative wants, a standardization of knowledge and information so that teachers aren't anymore allowed to bring independent perspective. They have to represent the Common Core, and that's it.
We also would like to bring into context that this is not something entirely new. It's been a plan that's been developing for a long time now. We can also refer to people to do their own research further, and especially the work of John Taylor Gatto. We will also be leaving several links here. And the reason why we find it very important to link it to understanding the current times that we are living in is precisely how we came to this point. So what would you guys say in relation to the consequence also when it comes to hearing that your child now belongs to the state? What do you say, Bill, about this?
Well, I would say, just in relation to the history, that an important point to consider is how this entire process has developed, because a specific aim or the reason why the Common Core is now being introduced is because of the international testing of school children that started in the early 80s and in the late 80s and the early 90s, that thought they were on the forefront of education, such as the US and also here in Scandinavia, were shocked to realize that the school children were reading and performing in maths at such lower, sorry?
No, go ahead.
They were performing at such a lower capacity than countries that they would have, considered themselves superior to. So this race, this knowledge race, was then initiated, and since then has there been this, intense competition between countries for being the country that has the best education and where children learn the most, learn the fastest.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I would like to add that point. There is a huge point of with the measuring of intellect, like teachers that every teacher I've ever talked to has had. They're aware that the Common Core is not working, but they have to jump through so many hoops, and they have to measure students constantly in terms of what they've learned. They're constantly tested. Students, and they're overwhelmed with the workload. And it's basically like by the time the teacher gets in the position of actually teaching the children, they just have a set curriculum of what is the canon, what must be tested, and they have a hard time of getting out of it because there's just so much. There's just too much testing. The Common Core is structured in such a way where it's about information and that's able to be measured and that's able to be graded, and so.
And well, what about we know that, for example, teachers have to adjust to it, and sometimes they don't even teach something outside of the curriculum because what's the point if the kids are not going to be tested on that information? But the most important thing also to mention is that this is being coerced, and parents are also being entirely alienated from the educational process of their children. What's your perspective on this as well? On parents and their involvement in education?
Well, as far as I have investigated, parents don't know the standards. They don't. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, parents don't understand what the Common Core is. They think they don't understand the way that it's structured to work for the state. The fact that it's basically, it kind of comes back to money, and the teachers have to perform so well and test so high, and the schools don't get funding. So ultimately, it just comes back to money, but the parents don't. Yeah, the parents don't see that. Unfortunately, they just want the student to do well and get the best grade, but that's not making them any more aware of their cultural diversity in the world. Like they don't see that. So, and unfortunately, their kind of esteem usually kind of suffers because of that.
And very few parents these days have the time or the skill to actually sit down with their children and assist them with their homeworks. And even parents, I mean, you can just go on YouTube and investigate it for yourself, for example. Even parents that do want to sit down and work, they don't understand it. So what are they then supposed to do, you know, to help their children? That's a big question.
I would also suggest people to get to know what Common Core is, to actually find the type of exercises that children are going through, and to see how convoluted the information is and how it's almost designed to confuse individuals, but mostly to kind of say to the parent, you cannot support your child because it's so different from your education, so only the school can take care of it, which is the point that I was mentioning before, how it's almost like the schooling system and the state is the only one that is prepared enough or capable enough to educate your child. We have a comment from Maya. She kind of placed it on the Q&A section. She's saying the Common Core is just another step in what was already been in the process of dumbing down the children to secure the good jobs for the elite, while the majority is submissive to the system. Already today, if you investigate why the unemployment rate in the US is high, it's because employers cannot find employees that went out from university because they do not get the practical training that is required for the jobs that are available. So the Common Core is further supporting the disadvantage that the majority has when it comes to the market force, because the Common Core is further standardizing everyone to a specific mind frame where they are unable to even imagine that they are able to stand in high quality jobs. And yes, this is something that we were going to be discussing as well, how due to this standardization, they are essentially saying you're only meant to be a worker in the production line, do not even consider that you can do better than this. And so, I mean, it's once again another way to shoot you in the leg, or shoot ourselves in the leg when it comes to restricting, limiting, and purposely leaving kids with this very narrow mind frame from which they are supposed to then operate in our society. Because then you know that you are creating an entire generation of essentially dumbed down individuals that cannot develop proper critical thinking skills, or cannot have proper ability to speak or express themselves because they're lacking vocabulary for it. So let's look at this context of what Maya explained throughout her comment. Thanks, Maya. In relation to, you know, the economic effect of this as well.
Yeah, so something that I find interesting is having a look at, you know, where is it that we know standardization from? Where is it that we know profit optimization and lowering costs from? Where is it that we know streamlining and measuring from? We know it from market capitalism. So that would then beg the question, is the school then functioning as a unit or as a production facility under market capitalism? And what is so interesting is that this is not anything new, you know, and this is also why we're talking about industrial education. And what we're actually seeing in terms of the consequences is that every time there's a problem in society or in the education system, there's what is being done to remediate it is just more of the same, more testing, more rigorous testing, more focus on hard academic subjects. And the result is a depletion of social like Bill was talking about, a depletion of social responsibility, empathy, critical thinking, all of this which is not included in market capitalism, all of this which is not relevant in market capitalism because it's all about optimizing profits.
And that would really empower children as well, which is also, if we look at the greater context and everything that we've talked throughout these Hangouts, nothing at the moment is designed to support and empower ourselves. Why? Because we haven't actually decided to do that for ourselves first. So that's also another context to look at, that this is not something that it's been done onto us and it's something evil that we have to fight against. No, it's rather understanding where we haven't been, in fact, actively participating and actively aware of what is the agenda, so to speak, of how our education systems are working and what's the purpose thereof, and if they are in fact founded and based upon that which will be best for developing the utmost potential of my child. Bill, you want to say something?
Well, one thing is that it also maintains the status quo because students that go to a poor inner city public school are, you know, usually not white. They're usually Latino, or and the school doesn't have the funding to provide the tools necessary for the student to actually even gain critical thinking skills, or to understand what is outside academia. They don't get that. So because of that, they do poor on testing, and then they don't get funding. So it's kind of like this cycle that the Common Core has created to keep social inferiority still existing, but it's very quiet. You don't see that. You just see, oh, you know, the public school over in, you know, Missouri, they just failed. The students are stupid, but it's not, has nothing to do with that. It comes back to, again, money, and unfortunately that too keeps the status quo. It keeps blue collar families, parents that can't afford to send their children to upper class Montessori schools or whatever. They can't. So, you know, that keeps the elite in their place.
Yeah.
Afford to send their students to good schools very much.
Anna?
Yeah, I would just like to add, because I'm looking at this also in an international, global perspective, that the whole idea is that making America's children able to compete on a global market, okay? And we're measuring that, or they're measuring that, according to international standards. And this is, for example, the PISA testing that is being done every, is it 4 years? And the countries that rank highest on these tests are China is number 1, and then I think South Korea, or Korea, is number 4 on the number 4th on the list. And a really cool, like, or not cool, but a really profound example of the consequences that this kind of education has is that while South Korea is doing really well in their students achieving great results in math and South Korea also have some of the highest suicide numbers in the whole world. It's a country where most people commit suicide, and especially among its teenage generations. And it's the same with China. You know, for all the achievements that they make in the academic subjects, you see often in the news how there is a lack of social empathy and responsibility within the community.
I agree with that. It seems like, yes.
Sorry.
I
was just saying,
yeah.
when we think of the world, there's a lag, sorry for everyone that's watching. When we think the world only in terms of world powers and competing against each other, we tend to absolutely then place any form of value or actual care and consideration for the individual aside and simply standardize, which means seeing the mass and how to get the mass to get these nice numbers and ranks so that we can become the world power, which is what's happening in China, for example. But go and look what's happening to children that, in essence, live through this very extensive stress because they have to keep up with these standards that also the parents are brainwashed, we have to say, that are indoctrinated also to follow them within their work, so the child must also do very well in school. And, I mean, is this really what we want for our children? Of course not. Bill, go ahead.
No, I agree with all that. There's a huge, I know in South Korea they have a huge importance on being socially acceptable and being presentable and producing this kind of mask. And fortunately, yeah, they might be very good at the PISA international exam, but their critical thinking skills fail. So there's a huge correlation between focusing, as you focus on regurgitating this information you kind of lose empathy and you lose a kind of living principle that just doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. We have a comment, guys, so let's look at it. It's from Rebecca. She's saying, what is the starting point here? To me, there appears to be so much abdication of self-responsibility by the parents themselves, and are the schools simply stepping in where parents have neglected to ensure that the child reaches their full potential? Anna, what would you say?
No, it's a symbiosis. So it's not just, that it's the parents' fault and then the schools are just stepping in. It's multidimensional in that way. Is that like Bill was saying, that the cycle perpetuates itself, and because you also have to consider the education of these parents, because the education system that was before Common Core also wasn't optimal. So the parents who are now who are faced with Common Core, they also don't have the skills to independently support their children. Like Bill was saying, a lot of parents aren't able to put their children in Montessori schools or homeschool them. So I would say that we have to look at both sides of it. But from my perspective, for example, here in Sweden, there is a very high level of trust towards the education system. And in that sense, it's very easy to put blinders on and think that, well, they're the experts. What do I know? So I would say that it's a point also of disempowerment on the part of the parents, where this is something that we as a community globally have to support each other with, where we as parents empower ourselves and each other to realize that it's not so black and white, as we can see from the consequences of what is being developed in the school system.
I absolutely agree with that. Bill, do you have any comments on that?
No, I agree with all that. I mean, parents are kind of put in that position where they can only do so much and choose what school based on their.
Is he freezing, or is it only me?
Yeah, no, he is free. He's frozen.
Okay, so I would like to also begin looking at
now he's back.
You froze a little bit, Bill, so can you repeat the last part that you said?
Am I moving? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we didn't hear what you were saying.
No, I agree with that. Basically, yeah, I agree. Like, parents, they only have so much leeway based on how they and their social status. That, I mean, it's they only have so much leverage in terms of putting their students in certain schools. So.
Yeah, so this is also a consequential outflow of the entire system. Like, we're only, having a look at the education system here, but we have to look at why parents have to be working so many hours to maybe sometimes not even one job, but maybe two or sometimes even three to make ends meet. And that's why they don't have enough time to be spending that time with their children or become more involved in their education, because they're also in that survival mode. So that's why we also propose the provision of a living income guarantee, because this is one of the various problems that stem from not providing the guaranteed right to live in dignity, which means giving money for people to not only maybe work less, but also to for all of us to become more involved in terms of what can be done to solve the problems that we are witnessing now, such as Common Core, and how alienated the society has been from such implementation. We have a comment. I'll just briefly go through it. What is industrial education all about? We've been discussing it throughout the Hangout, Garishma Gulati, so I suggest that you, once this Hangout is done, you can rewatch it, replay the video on YouTube, so you'll get a context on it. So essentially, it is the creation of an education system destined to create form workers. I would like to, yeah, go ahead. Okay, I heard a noise. Okay, so I would like to begin looking at solutions, because that is something that we are here for, essentially. There's a lot of information out there for everyone that's watching. Please inform yourself of in more detail what Common Core is. We have a question from Pablo Guajardo. He's saying, what is the solution for teachers that are aware of this equation? Because if they try to do something out of the curriculum, then they can be considered as they are not doing their job appropriately. And this is definitely a cool question. What would you guys say?
It's a real tightrope, because I mean, I focus on teaching writing, and there are sets of standards. There's something called the post-secondary success framework for post-secondary success in writing, and it focuses more so on responsibility. It focuses on metacognition, allowing students to see what they're doing and how it affects the community as a whole, instead of just this academia bubble. But it's not really implemented. Common Core is implemented mostly in the majority of schools in the United States. But that doesn't mean, I mean, teachers still are able to implement certain writing exercises to focus on children and students being honest and like sharing their experiences, sharing teachers showing students that there's not this canon that's untouchable, that they can contribute somehow to the cultural knowledge. And I did post a link on the event page. And there's pieces that teachers can take out of it that are really huge. But it is again focused on responsibility, allowing students to share their writing with others and kind of expose kind of vulnerability, so that students begin to see each other as equal instead of this very competitive, gotta get the A and just regurgitate this information that really is helpful.
Okay, so in essence, your solution is something that you're proposing already, so we will leave the links for that in terms of the writing aspect that you are focusing on for everyone that's interested. I do see it, I read it, and yes, the principles are very important and valuable, and so that then teachers do not see themselves caged into these dogmas that they have to simply, as you were saying, regurgitate and not be able to get out of the curriculum, so to speak. Anna, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say that it's important to not try and like break out of it or try and rebel against it. For whatever reason it is here, we're going to have to work with it the best way possible and assist and support children the best way possible to get through it. And then I would also say that what one can do as a teacher is to educate children about Common Core history, about where they are situated in relation to this initiative. Obviously not from an indoctrinating or political perspective, but because this is something that children often ask me and that they don't understand. Why do I have to do this? What's the purpose? So I would say that it's very important to contextualize the whole point for them, and really, okay, work with it, whatever it is, and not be afraid of the Common Core, even though it might not be optimal or it might not even be great. It doesn't mean that it has to, that we have to sell our soul, so to speak. And as Bill was saying, there are still ways that you can assist and support children and youngsters to develop integrity, even though they still have to work with these initiatives. And I would say that it's the same for parents. Educate yourself on what it is, what the demands are, what it is your child has to be able to do, so that they can, effectively go through the education system. And then meanwhile, there's a lot we can do as teachers. I, for example, write a blog where I also post critical perspectives on the Common Core, and I'm sure that Bill also, you don't have to only look at what you can do in the classroom, but also what you can do in the community.
And that's also one of the reasons why we are here talking about this very important subject, because we know that, as we've said many, many times, education is the foundation of how we will be living as a society. So this is in the best interest of all. I mean, I'm not even American or anything like that, but I'm an individual that also in Mexico they're getting down with the standardization as well in schools. And this shouldn't be a matter of nations either, but simply why are we defacing living out all of these living principles that should have been in our education systems from the beginning of it. But as we know, nothing in this system has been founded upon principles. So that's why we, as Equal Life Foundation, also focus a lot on what is missing out in our current world system. And I would like to also get in the development of going from competition to kind of the emphasis on the individual, the self-perfection, so to speak. How can we go from the current notion of I have to get my child to be the best in class because he has to get straight A's, for example? How can that be, within the context of walking through Common Core, how can that be maybe directed to an outcome that is rather supportive for the individual, the child in this case? Who wants to answer that? Or give perspective?
Well, I think, yeah, like Anna said, being able to show the student what Common Core is, who they are within it. A lot of students are starting to become very aware of the demands, and they don't understand what's going on. So definitely bringing awareness to that is huge. Introducing them to life outside of academia, it's not.
Yeah, I would say also that when it comes to being part of the academic world, you really have to work with it, as Anna was saying, but also changing the starting point of the education so that they do not see it only as this imposition of things that I do not have an idea of what they are for, but also to understand that, yes, we're currently living like an outflow of all of us also not having been interested, not having been participants in how our world system operates, which means how our politics, how our education system operates, healthcare system. I mean, we're seeing right now the consequential outflow of all of that, and that's why there's crisis everywhere in every aspect of our reality. So also, I mean, if one is able to, as a parent, also educate oneself, first of all, on this, then you will be also maybe able to practice the homeschooling process, which is something that we would suggest, but then the parent would have to also be educated enough to take this responsibility as well.
Yeah, a point to consider is that education doesn't only happen in school, especially when you're a young child. Education happens in every moment. Education happens also when you leave school and you go home, and whatever you're exposed to in your own house, it's educational. You learn about the world, you learn about relationships, you learn vocabulary, you learn what words can be used in various contexts. So maybe in that respect, parents can also give themselves some more credit, and in that give themselves more responsibility in not simply thinking that education is what happens at school.
I absolutely agree with that. Because right now, even society is a reflection of that segregation that happens in families where parents do not know, have no idea what their children are watching on TV or what they're learning in school. And so it's like, okay, someone else is taking care of them. And if we look at the outflow of that, that's why there are so many problems, mental illnesses, and further disruption in the core, which is the family, which is where principles should be established in essence. And I would also like to give the perspective in terms of the living income guaranteed, because we are in fact a solution that, yes, focuses on the economic and political aspect of the problem. But let's just look at this. If the living income guarantee is designed to also provide money, whether you work, for example, if you work, you get a better wage, which means a higher standard living. But also, if you have no means of income, that means that a mother that decides to, for example, be homeschooling, they would get the living income guaranteed, and that would imply that you as a parent can take that time, the necessary time, to walk through the schooling process with your child, for example. Or even if you don't homeschool them entirely, you can take that time to be more involved with them. And when it comes to the creation of workers, I mean, that is already being taken up by machines. So we cannot really think of human beings as working on a line, on a production line that is like 18th century type of mentality, 19th century. So we have to really start considering that technological unemployment is a reality. We've talked about it here in Hangouts. So we cannot really look at human beings as machines that will produce. We have to start giving ourselves a better purpose in this world and reality. So that's why also living income entirely supports every initiative that involves how can we develop ourselves with our utmost potential. Because that's what we are here as human beings for. It's no longer to produce the most and to get to the highest ranking. Yes, we all want our quality living, so we all require to work and develop ourselves further, but within the starting point of that self-perfection, that development of to our utmost potential. Sorry. So what's your perspective about this proposal within the context of living income guarantee?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I just want to point. Yeah, I mean that would living income guarantee space for your parents to give attention, their children. It would provide space, that time that they can spend, and it's so much because right now the way the system is, it's very struggle for survival, and students just trying to get the best grade. So it's not, and also of course, parents would be able to send their students to good schools. You wouldn't have to pick and choose, and so I think that ability that would allow parents to be more involved with what their students doing, and provide kind of an open floor for that, which would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Anna?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Bill. So it's more a point of adding in that, at least this is how it's have been, that, becoming a teacher is seen as a very easy thing to do, and you have, these great benefits. I mean, it's not really like that in reality, but it's kind of seen that way. So a lot of people become teachers who aren't interested in teaching, who aren't passionate about it, who, maybe don't even really like kids. And so our kids are being taught in many situations by people who are completely distanced and not really there with the purpose of actually educating. So that would be one point. And then also school budgets. That if that entire point where schools have to compete with each other, and schools in low-income areas, they don't, like Bill was talking about before, this evil cycle. If that whole equation is sort of taken out of the entire school life, it would change a lot. If schools could really focus on actually educating.
I entirely agree with both of you. And we see once again that the core problem is also that lack of money that has diminished our potential to live to our utmost potential from all sides and all areas in our lives. So yes, obviously, if we start taking out the profit motive from our education, then we will focus on what really matters, which is these living principles, which is integrity, self-responsibility, consideration of another as yourself, supporting each other to get to that level of self-perfection, if you want to call it that, which is nothing else but showing to each other that we can develop skills that are not meant to be sold, for example, in terms of getting a job only, but really to support yourself as an individual, because this society is precisely created of individuals that are well educated, that can be then, you know, proposing further solutions for this system, become part of the politics, become part of managing an entire corporation that has a better foundation of principles like equality, considering what is best for your worker, what is best for you, etc., which is nowhere to be found at this moment, or very scarce examples we're getting in terms of creating this cooperative type of mentality instead of the dog-eat-dog mentality that we've been living in. So, guys, we're about to wrap this up, so I'd like to hear your very last perspectives. You as a teacher, you both as teachers, what you take from this, what you will be implementing, for example, and that it also remains as a, I wouldn't say an advice, but maybe a consideration, a perspective for teachers and parents out there. Bill, what would you say?
I would say consideration for teachers is to break out of focusing on what to teach in a curriculum instead of, and let the student kind of open up and talk about their experiences and what they want to contribute, because if a student is aware that they can actually contribute something to society more than just getting a dead-end job or something like that, then they'll have more incentive to actually want to do that. But if the student isn't able to even see that they contribute, then it just kind of, it turns the individual into just a product of the system, and so that would be my consideration as a teacher and for other teachers.
Yeah, very cool. Allowing children and teachers to realize that this is just a set of standards. Yes, you have to go with it. Yes, but you know, you can do more than that and enable others to realize that they actually don't have to entirely only be set in that mind frame, but that they can also expand and so support each other to kind of break through the veil of this standardization and these norms and this cage, in essence, that has become currently education with the Common Core. Anna?
Yeah, so since Bill was talking to the teachers, I will speak to the parents instead. And I will say, as a parent, or sorry, not as a parent, but as a teacher, I meet your children on a daily basis, and I see how miserable they are, and I see how their entire focus is, and now I'm talking about the little bit older students, their entire focus is on the tests. They're nervous, they're agitated, they're frustrated, they don't understand it, and very seldom do I hear students talk about things that they've learned, things that they're passionate about. The only things that they do share that they're passionate about are things that happen outside of school, computer games and movies and stuff like that. And so I would say that the purpose, the fundamental purpose of education is allowing the individual and so the individual in the community, in society, to develop and grow to the world can live to its full potential. And what is going on right now is that we're accepting this race for the global economy. We're accepting that as though it's an objective fact, as though it is reality. But you know, it's not the reality of the planet Earth. It's the reality of the systems that we have constructed on the planet, and that means that we can change it. That means that we don't have to take it for granted. And it's like what we're seeing now with the Common Core and with our children, and as teachers with the children that we teach, is that we're seeing the brutality of the system is, you know, smacked up against the innocence of the child, and it is brutal, and it is, you know, it is something that we're going to have to be able to face so that we can begin changing it. And as a parent, you can start in your own home. With seeing it, asking your child about it, and actually begin listening and hearing what it is that is going on in our school system and how it's changing, because that's a very important thing, is that when when a paradigm change happens in an education system, it means that the society is about to change, because that is what affects society, is the education system. So, and we don't know where we will be in 10 or 20 years because of this system. So we have to start obviously working with it, but then also working with the alternatives that are available, that we can share the resources that we have.
Absolutely agree with that. And I consider that we can leave it there, and entirely also looking at the aspect of how we have essentially become this subject to the problem outside. We see it as something that we kind of have to be punished by, or we sometimes place ourselves as victims. But as Anna was saying, this is about self-responsibility at all times, which means we created this system, so we have to integrate ourselves from the very starting point of, for example, another's life, which in this case is the parent figure, how and what principles you're going to be essentially giving to your child to be able to, even if the world outside is chaos, which we will be facing, let's face it, and that's our reality at the moment, so that they can also have their principles, their starting point well-founded of what really matters in life and how they can be supported by their parents. And even if they go to a standardized school, they can also get to their houses with their parents and have meaningful conversations and communicate with each other and learn further from the school curriculum as well. So that would be also what I suggest to everyone. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here, for your time. And we will see you guys, and you watching there, yes, next week for another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed. Please subscribe to our new channel. As you can see, it's a new one, so remember to do that. And see you next time. Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.